This is Akashvani. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on achieving Atmanirbhar Bharat in coal sector. The participants are Narendra Taneja, energy expert, and Ishan Mittal, Akashvani correspondent.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi hailed the rise in India's coal production by 22.6% to 893 million tons in 2022-23 from 728 million tons in 2018-19 over a 5-year period. He termed it to be very good news for the sector and also for India's overall economic progress. The Ministry of Coal envisages annual production of over 1 billion tons of coal this year. Mr. Taneja, we want to ask you about the National Action Plan of the Government of India, which is expected to produce around 1.5 billion tons of coal by 2030. Could you elaborate on what is the aim of the National Action Plan and why has India's coal production been low until now?
When it comes to India's energy security, which essentially means securing supply of fuels, when you look at oil, our dependence on import is very high. Natural gas dependence is high. But when it comes to coal, which is, as I said, is the mainstay, our dependence on import is going down rapidly thanks to the government of India's efforts. And the result today is that coal production in the country, as you just mentioned, the coal production has registered now a significant growth, almost in the region of 25%. And at the same time, we have seen that our dependence on imports for coal has also come down by roughly, again, at about 24 to 25%. I mean, in 2020, we were importing roughly 248 million tons of coal from overseas, mainly from South Africa, from Indonesia, from Namibia, and Australia, and New Zealand, and other places. It is now down to 186 million tons now, and the government effort is to bring it down further by pushing domestic production up or to make India kind of Atmanirbhar or self-reliance in terms of coal. So the target now is basically that, like for this year, along the target, this financial year's target is to go for 1,012 million tons of domestic production and to reduce dependence on imports even further. So overall, when you look at it, India's domestic production of coal is going up. Now, government, thanks to policies and also new technologies, new methods, better training, better management, their overall production has gone up at the time, especially which was needed because per capita energy consumption is going up because now practically every village has access to electricity and almost all households also have access to electricity. And the government is working very hard on the eradication of energy poverty in all spheres. And therefore, demand for coal in particular is going up because we consume a lot of coal for domestic production of electricity. And therefore, the government effort that our dependence on import should come down zero. And at the same time, whatever potential we have in terms of domestic production is taken to the highest possible level.
So the government plans to use the National Master Plan dashboard to ensure train availability for coal evacuation. What is the role played by transportation in coal availability, and how can rail connectivity help to improve coal availability?
Well, this is an interesting question. When you look at the country's map, I mean, the coal areas are mainly in eastern part of the country, there's some in central part of the country, and a few in western part of the country. While look at, for instance, the population is spread, the business spread, the industry spread, we have got coal-fired power plants practically all across the country. In other words, which means that you need to transport coal from wherever the mines are to wherever the plants are. And that's a huge challenge because we are a vast country and some of these power plants are located at a distance of even 2,000 kilometers from coal pits, so where the coal is produced. And to make sure that this coal is transported and transported the right way in the right method and is available at the right economics to coal plants across the country is a huge challenge. And especially in times like monsoon season, which can go on sometime for 3 months and disrupt rail transport or disrupt the loading and unloading of coal. So the effort has been, and there is tremendous improvement in that direction to make sure that the coal is available 24/7, all the 12 months from wherever the coal mines are to power plants wherever they may be located, northern India to southern India, eastern India to western India, in some cases in some very, very difficult terrains or difficult areas. So railway plays a very, very important role in that. Rail, the fast track method is employed, in some places dedicated corridor method is employed, special wagons are there, and we make sure the wagons are taken as close as possible to coal mines, and then they are deliver the coal as close as possible to where the power plants are located. So coordination of all this. I mean, imagine imagine moving electricity for 1.4 billion people, and imagine the size of the country, and imagine the power plants located in different parts of the country. Massive task, which the government does in cooperation with the Ministry of Railways on the one hand, Ministry of Coal at the other, and various state governments at the same time. And if you look at, for instance, the preparations for that, or what you refer to, preparations start months in advance, especially when it comes to the monsoon season, which can sometimes be very, very disruptive. Sometimes the mines get flooded, sometimes the routes get flooded, and sometimes it just gets very, very difficult to ship it or transport it. So now the new technology, new methods, new practices are adopted. So the result is that the coal is available to power plants all across the country. And when it comes to difficult season like monsoon, the government starts planning, the coordination committees start planning together with various state governments and the miners and the power plant months in advance. For instance, soon we will have monsoon in the country like in July, in a couple of months from now. But the preparations to make sure the coal is transported across the country as smoothly as possible started already in the month of January. And practically every week the meeting takes place. So the result is that better coordination, better policy management, and at the same time, the better infrastructure in terms of the railways in particular, but also road. The result is that this issue, which used to be a very big issue 10 years ago, even 9 years ago, today is still a challenge, but it's kind of very well managed. And when you look at for instance, the challenge in terms of, let's say on the scale of 1 to 10, if they used to be 7 earlier, the challenge is still there, but they're down to 2% now. So the overall management, if you look at it, and the overall coordination between all the players is very, very smooth. And the result is that our dependence on imported coal is going down. And at the same time, power generation capacity is going up rapidly at the time when the per capita energy consumption, per capita electricity consumption is going up all the time.
Truly a massive logistic exercise. Now from logistics coming to the quality of coal, as part of Atmanirbhar Bharat, the government is also eyeing a coking coal strategy. Could you talk about the quality of coal available in India and why are we importing coal despite having some of the largest reserves in the world?
Well, you see, in some mines, quality is a challenge in the sense that coal that we are blessed with by nature, the quality may not be as good, for instance, as the quality of coal being imported from countries like Indonesia or Australia and some other geographies. So therefore, in the past, the government has been kind of saying that, all right, we import and that we would mix that coal with our domestic coal in order to basically increase the overall efficacy and at the same time make sure that we can get the best out of coal. And if you look at in the past, there was also a strategy to set up sub-power plants in the coastal areas, which were heavily dependent, in some cases actually 100% dependent on imported coal. So idea was that not only import coal, but to import this closest to the port so that we can generate electricity there and that electricity can go to the national grid. So thereby saving cost. Basically a kind of work on economics. But when it comes to nature, we have quality of coal that we are blessed with. There's nothing you can do about it. But the idea now is to, whatever we have in terms of the quality of coal, to use technology and to use technology at the end of the power plant in such a way that we can actually get the maximum possible out of coal. And that is showing the results. And the result is that the Indian coal now is being increasingly more used by power plants because they are employing better technology. And some of these power plants are customized for Indian coal. So the result is that we are able to use our coal in the best possible manner.
India is also eyeing clean coal technology, especially through coal to hydrogen, as well as coal and lignite gasification. Could you elaborate how India plans to make coal production cleaner and how hydrogen and gasification can be achieved?
Well, coal to gas has been a kind of plan which was put into action quite some time back. And the strategy is simple, to basically convert coal into gas and then use that gas for our industrial requirements. I mean, we started baby steps many years ago, thanks to the new government policies and incentives that more and more mines now are coming under this scheme, and we are using that to convert coal into gas and then use that gas and for other sources such as hydrogen that you mentioned. But on one hand, we are doing that, and at the same time, government is working hard making sure that the emissions from coal at the time of mining, mainly at the time of power production, is brought to the minimum possible. So share of coal, for instance, today in our power generation is in excess of about 65% to 67%. But now strategy is basically that by 2030, that the share of coal in power generation will come down to about 54%. which means the renewable energy will occupy bigger space by 2030. Renewable means the solar and nuclear and all other sources. So I think it's an overall holistic approach where the coal, of course, remains the big boy. Some people call it the king coal. But at the same time, the idea is that on the one hand, you use coal in the most efficient manner. At the same time, you bring down the emissions to the best possible level. And at the same time, you give the maximum possible push to renewables. And finally, to use coal in other forms and shapes, for instance, coal gasification. So I think various strategy and all kind of incentives that are required are being provided. And in the process, the entire coal landscape of the country is changing rapidly towards A, more modern, B, more productive, and C, of course, helping India to reduce the dependence on imports and achieve Atmanirbhar Bharat.
Sir, I wanted to touch upon the point. At one end, we are trying to increase the production of coal at home. At the same time, we also eye the reduction of reliance on coal. So how do we attain these two goals and strike a balance between them?
Well, coal is a domestic resource. I mean, we are very blessed in terms of coal. We've got a third largest reserves of coal in the world. But when it comes to oil, which again is a very important source of energy for the country and economy, our dependence on imports is very, very high. So the strategy is very simple. On the one hand, to bring down the use of coal. But my own sense is that given the energy security being a priority and given the fact that coal is a resource where, for instance, we are almost self-reliant, I think coal will kind of stay as the mainstay of India's energy security for a very, very long time to come. Even, for instance, if the share of coal-fired power generation goes down by 2030 to 54% in our total power generation capacity, my sense is that the volume of coal-fired power plants is only going to go up. In fact, we are setting up more coal-fired power plants for our future requirements. But at the same time, the overall share of coal-fired power plants or the coal-fired power will come down, and the role of renewables will go up to almost like more than 60%. But that's going to be a gradual process. Government targets 2030. Might take longer, but my sense is that coal will remain and play a very, very significant role for very, very long time to come. Because the strategy for a country like India, looking at our geographical parking, looking at the kind of security environment around India, I think energy security will remain a priority. And when it comes to energy security, coal is one source of fuel that is always there and that gives India the comfort that we can manage our energy requirement without a single drop of oil in case of emergency, which means the coal can take care of our critical requirement and plus together with the domestic production of oil and gas. So there in that energy security mix and doctrine, coal is actually very, very important, at least for another 25 years.
At the same time, the government is trying to envisage the entry of its undertaking Coal India Limited into allied industries such as aluminium, power, solar wafers, solar power, and renewable. Could you talk about this kind of expansion of a government entity that is focused on coal production into allied energy resources, and how do you think this could be attained going forward?
When it comes to corporate entities such as Coal India, I mean, you have to make these entities, these large companies like Coal India. Coal India is one of the largest corporations in the country, in fact, in Asia. So you have to make them future ready by basically diversifying into allied businesses. Since Coal India is also a big and rich company, they can also diversify into other areas such as nuclear power tomorrow or hydrogen and so on and so forth. So therefore, here the strategy is very simple, that you are preparing the company for the future so that in 50 years from now, Coal India still remains very, very relevant for its employees, for the country's economy, and for its own existence. And therefore, you're gradually transforming this company from only coal-based company to an integrated energy company. So this is about transformation. But for next 20 years, Coal India will remain very much a coal company in the sense that coal will remain main business. But at the same time, companies will be gradually changing its DNA, its direction, its track and everything, so that in 30 years from now, Coal India may be known for other sources of energy, and maybe in 50 years from now, Coal India will be known for solar, for nuclear. So I think that's a path which has to be followed for the welfare of their employees and also for the country's own future.
Thank you, Mr. Taneja.
Thank you.
You are listening to a discussion on achieving Atmanirbhar Bharat in coal sector. The participants were Narendra Taneja, energy expert, and Ishan Mittal, Akashvani correspondent. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 9289094044.